Welcome to Career Tools. This week, Work-Family Balance, Chapter 2, The Acid Test, Advanced Edition. As Mike would say, here we go. Wendy, we're going to talk about Work-Family Balance, Chapter 2. And it's funny, I've just been telling people we don't want to call it balance anymore, right? Because balance implies equality.
That you can,
but we can. That's what other people call it, and it's in the nomenclature, so we'll use that. Look, we tell people all the time at Manager Tools and Career Tools that your family comes first, and that you need to block time for your family first on your calendar. That was in one of our very first casts on priority management 8 years ago. We tell people to leave work on time, take time for important family events. And we also say, and it ought to be obvious to people, the most important people to your colleagues are their families. So we've said before, the acid test is you should know the kids' names of your directs. What are we going to tell them today about knowing more than that, broadening their perspective about other people's lives outside of work?
Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about things that consume people's thoughts, whether they're in work or out of work. And funnily enough, the same things that consume your thoughts consume your colleagues' thoughts. So it's really easy to guess what might be important to them.
Yeah, in other words, you don't have to guess is the point.
No, exactly.
Right? You already know. You just have to assume for a moment that most people are like you, which is probably true.
Exactly. And then we're going to talk about who you need to know that about, how to find out, and what to do with that information.
Really simple, really direct, classic Manager Tools, Career Tools stuff.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, good. So again, we're trying to broaden people's understanding about knowing other people, understanding them more fully. This would help a manager, it'd help a director, it'd help anybody. The first thing is, what do we need to know about other people?
Yeah, and if you're human, it's not hard. So basically, as I just said, the thoughts or the things that are important to you are important to other people. So if we think first about the things that are important to us, so there's our family, your spouse, your children, your brothers and sisters, their children, their parents, for blended families, there's ex-partners, new partners, their children, your step-parents, and anybody else that you count as family. There's lots of people who have people in their lives who are not blood relations, but count to them as family. So all of those people are important to you, and you think about them at work. You have thoughts about, oh, I need to talk to that person, or I'm worried about that person, or I need to get something for that person, or whatever. And those thoughts that you're having, your colleagues are having similar thoughts.
Right. The point we're making here is what you think about is very similar, if not identical, to what other people think about, and it starts with your family.
Exactly.
And even if you would say, I don't know that family's first with me, the fact is, if you have a family, if you're married and have children and so on, just simply the fact that you're in that family unit takes a bunch of your time. And the things that you do with your time outside of work are things that consume your thoughts separate from work, separate from the love and the connection you feel. It's just a fact of your life that if you have kids, the things you do with your kids and so on, we'll talk about that in a minute, all that stuff eats up a bunch of your time in good ways.
Yeah. And
if you're thinking about it, so is everybody else. So I think you mentioned friends as well?
Yeah, so friends, all the people that are important to you, so people you...
Outside of family.
Outside of family, exactly. So
right.
People you exercise with, people you hang out with at weekends, classmates, neighbours, friends from church, friends from anywhere that you've met them, and we all accumulate friends as we go through our lives. And all of those people are important to us too. And then there's children's activities. So I don't have children, but I have noticed other people who have children have a lot of activities. So there's everything from baby yoga to college football. It seems that at the moment a child is born, it has an activity all of the time.
I really struggle with baby yoga. I just do. I'm sure it's going to be the rage and everything. But if that's the kind of thing you think about, those people with babies probably think about it as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and everything the kids are interested in, whether it's organised or not. So, for instance, Drake's really into computer games. It's not something that's organised, but that's something I know about him, and I know that it's important to you because it's important to him.
Yeah. Easy.
Yeah. And then there's all the activities that you do. So your hobbies, the classes you're taking, things you like just because you like them. I like penguins just because I do. And people who know me well know that about me. And everybody has one of those quirks, you know? Mark likes pineapples. There's all sorts of things that people like. And I don't think about penguins all the time during the day, but if you want to get to know me, then Ask me about penguins. And then there's the rhythms of your life. Those are important to you. So there's like the regular things that you do each week, classes or exercise classes, or the once a week you meet up with a friend for lunch, whatever.
One of the things in the show notes here is the month your parents visit. Now look, if your parents visit your house that from somewhere else in the country or overseas, the same month every year, you know that. When you and your spouse are talking about planning May, you know your parents or her parents or his parents are going to be there for a couple of weeks. And that affects your ability to plan other things, whether it's holiday or a trip with your kids on a weekend or something. All those things affect that. The fact is, that's a rhythm of your life. And most of us mistakenly believe that other people know what the rhythms of our life are because they are fundamental to our lives. Well, first of all, other people don't know. And other people do have their own rhythms. And we'd be willing to bet you don't know what their rhythms are. And essentially what we're saying here is other people have their rhythms just like you do. We'll talk about it more in a minute. And you have a rhythm. I know what I can expect. I mean, I think my kids know, for instance, that I rarely travel between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I do sometimes, but not a lot. They know that, as an example, because of Manager Tools, it's a pretty standard thing. At the end of January, I go to Europe for clients and for conferences. And my kids know that. And it's a rhythm of my life. And other people have rhythms too. Again, we'll talk about that more.
Yeah. And people with school-age children have, semesters and vacations and what I call half term, and I think you guys call spring break, the week that you have off during spring. And it's really hard. Once your children get past a certain age, you kind of lose that. Like when the children are, 8, 9, 10, you're in that rhythm. When your children get to 25 and you have to start again with grandchildren, you've lost it. Like I can't remember when half term is. So it's hard to imagine if you don't have children, but those things are really important. So
yes. Okay, good. And then finally, one-off stressors, moving house, marriage, death, divorce, money problems, issues with your kids. Again, the month we mentioned before, the month your parents visit, right? And these are things that happen to other people, just like they happen to you. When they're happening to you, significant stressors that are not recurring, that don't have a normal periodicity, we hope. When they're happening to us, they consume a good part of our life. And when they're happening to other people, you can safely assume that if you've been through a divorce and you know somebody else is going through a divorce, you have a pretty good idea of what they're going through. And their ability to be fully engaged at work is enormously limited by that. And you may wish for something different, but in fact, you probably remember very, very well that that's what it was like for you. And those processes, moving house is another good example. What we would call moving in America, so many other people in the world call moving house. If somebody else is moving and you're not thinking about it because, well, you've done it before, you know what it's like. If you're not remembering, then you're not fully cognizant of what they're going through. You could be if you were more sensitive, but you're probably not.
So why is that important? Well, it's important because when your boss says, can you stay for an extra half hour to get this document printed for tomorrow? Your thought is, yes, but I'll have to get someone else to get Tommy from the dentist, or yes, but if I don't go to the gym now, it'll be busy later, oh, I was going to get groceries tonight and now I don't have time. So that's all of your non-work things playing into your work life, and that's what's happening to your colleagues as well. Part of it's about relationships. The better you know people, the better your relationship, and part of it's also about being able to be sensitive to people's needs when you're thinking about the work that needs to be done.
I actually think this is interesting. I'll bring up a sort of a counterintuitive point for this cast, which I find interesting. Every once in a while, managers ask us about, what happens for my direct who says, I don't want to share anything about my family. I don't want you to ask about my family. Well, generally we respect that, and we encourage you not to ask. We certainly don't want to harangue people and say there are 15 more things I need about my family. I need to know about your family, and until you tell me, I'm going to continue asking them. And we want to respect people who seem to keep a clear, bright line delineator between work and family. What I find fascinating is those are the same people who say, well, I'm sorry, but I can't because I got to pick my kid up, or no, I got to do this because of my wife. And it's like, well, gee, I didn't know I was allowed to ask. So in other words, I'm not allowed to know, but you're not allowed to claim it as a deterrent to me asking for some special considerations. Folks, if you're listening and you think you ought to keep work family separate, and we think in general your family comes first, but the fact is they blend together. And if you're not willing to share about your family, which if you've been listening for a while, surely you know we feel differently about that. If you're not willing to share about your family at all, and then you expect to use family issues like, no, I can't do that because of my kids or my spouse or whatever else, you're being, we think, unfair to the organization. And the idea that you have a family and you get to claim them as reasons why you can't work or can't do this or can't chip in certain tough times, but you're not willing to talk about them, it's actually true to say you're willing to talk about them, but only when it benefits you. So I would encourage you to think twice about that a little bit. We're not trying to pry if you don't want to share with us, but if you don't share, it limits your ability to claim them as deferrals against work pressures. Okay, so those are the things we need to know. And work and family impinge upon one another, or non-work life impinges on stuff. Okay, I need to know that because, again, if it's affecting me, if I could see it affecting me, family, all the other stuff, friends, one-off stressors and so on, it's going to affect other people, okay? Whom are we telling them they need to know this about, right? I mean, we're using that, our own life experience, to say to people, these are the things that you need to know about the people around you.
Yeah.
Well, who are those people that we need to know about?
Okay, so we'll start with the most important one, which is your boss. So for example, it's not smart to ask for a raise the day your boss's house is closing because he's got something else on his mind. Or to want to talk about your career for an hour the day he picks his daughter up from school and has ice cream with her. It's not smart to book meetings early when your boss goes to the gym before work, and if it doesn't go, it puts his whole day off.
Yeah, you may be asking, he may say or she may say yes and miss the gym, and they'll say yes because they feel it's a professional thing to do, and they'll know that you're the one that asked. Now you might say, well, he said yes, yeah, and he's trying to be approachable, and probably by 5 o'clock that day, he'll be in a crummy mood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to try and work with his schedule and the things that are going on outside of work, and you can only do that if you know those things about him.
You can only do it if you know. And the things you need to know about are the things you already think about in your own life. Just project it onto him or her. Good. Okay. Surely your directs too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all managers, tools managers respect the fact that their directs have a life outside of work, just like they do. And if you know all those things about your directs, you can accommodate them. If you know that somebody has to drop a child off at school or drop a child for the bus and the bus is like late 3 days out of 5, like don't book meetings at 8 o'clock because that person's always going to be late and always going to feel bad. So book them at 8:30. So it's probably not going to affect the rest of your team, but it gives a little bit of accommodation for the person who's got a struggle in the morning.
Yeah. Do you really have to have somebody on a call when you know she's in an MBA program and she's going to class? Right? And look, there are times when everybody needs to be on a call, but I can't tell you the number of times I realized, really, I don't need everybody. And I'm not suggesting that we have to brief everybody twice, once for the people who weren't there, but there's nothing wrong with saying for a 3-month period, hey guys, look, Jane's going to class Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We normally do one call during the week. In the evening, everybody's agreed to it. I know it impinges. We run it tightly. It runs from 7 to 7:30. We're going to have to do it Monday. We certainly don't want to do it Friday night. So we're going to have to do that Monday night going forward because that makes sure that Jane is there. She's a key part of this project. And we'll keep it a tight meeting and we'll allow Jane to come by doing it on Monday night. And if Jane were to say, hey, listen, I appreciate you giving me Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday more flexibility to do my MBA, but I really need Monday night for my family, so I can't do the half-hour meeting, I have a bit of a problem with that. I mean, I'd probably say, well, okay, then you won't be on the call, but it might affect my excitement about Jane's situation relative to me giving her 3 days where she can leave work early and totally focus on school, and then she also wants a 4th night when everybody else has been trying to work around her schedule.
Yeah. And also, I was thinking, as you were saying, it's also a reverse of the talking about people behind their backs rule. So that rule says if Wendy talks to Mark about Mike, then Mark suspects that Wendy is also talking to Mike about Mark behind his back, right? So
yes.
But if you accommodate Jane and her MBA program, then the rest of the team think, okay, that's really good of my boss, and if I need something in the future, I'm willing to ask because he's shown willingness to accommodate.
Yes.
And that makes them both willing to help Jane out, and it also makes them feel better about being in the team and working for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so hopefully this one is obvious after the last two. Your peers. So everybody that you work with, either that are in your team or that you work with who are in different teams but kind of interact with you on a regular basis. So every time you're respectful of somebody's schedule and stresses, it helps you work more effectively with them. And since your career success depends on relationships as much as it does results, then having those relationships and knowing those things about people is really useful.
Good. So now the question becomes, good, okay, I recognize now that my internal life relative to the things that go on in my life is probably very similar to other people. So I've got a roadmap of what I need to know. We know whom we need to know it for. How do we find out?
Well, what we're going to do is give everybody a questionnaire on your first day in the job and get them to fill it in.
Yeah,
I wish.
Sure.
Not.
Yeah.
But you can't do that because you'd be thought of as a little odd. But you can, if you develop it organically, but pay attention to what people say. So if Joe says, oh, Susie's ballet class is practicing for a recital tonight, then you know. Joe has a child called Susie. She likes ballet and there's a recital tonight. So tomorrow you can say to Joe, oh, how did Susie's ballet recital go? So you can make a mental note, if you think you're going to remember it. And if you're not, then write it down somewhere. Open a Word document and just write it down. And we're not talking about something like a Machiavellian dossier on Joe and, finding things that you can blackmail him about. You're just making a note about something that's important to him. And if you make a note about something that's important to someone else, that's the definition of caring about them, even if you don't think it's about caring about them.
Yeah, in fact, there are plenty of people who will do that kind of stuff and then say, well, I don't really care about other people.
Yeah.
You behave as if you do, which is what's important.
Exactly.
Okay? One of the things people tell me, particularly technical people, say, well, I don't really have a good system for that. You don't need a system. You need to begin to develop the mental muscle of paying attention to other people's lives and make small adjustments or make notes. I told somebody the other day, they said, how do you search your old notes that are 6 months old? I said, I rarely do, other than one-on-one notes to prepare for an annual review. Stuff that I do 6 months later, if there's stuff from 6 months ago that I think is going to be relevant now, I'm probably tearing it out and putting it in a folder that's around a certain project. And the point I then made was, when I write stuff down, it's not so that I can remember it 6 months later. It's so that I will help my memory now. I'm burning it into my skull. I remember things much better if I write it down during the meeting. So when you find something out, just write it down. If you don't have a system for how to capture that, it's not the end of the world. You increase the chances you'll remember it. It's that simple. And you might say, well, it's not perfect. I don't have it categorized. I can't search my database for Joe's nephew, Joe's niece's name, or ballet. I thought ballet had something to do with it. How do I search Evernote, or how do I search this for ballet? Okay, that's all great, but there are a lot of people who don't get started because they don't know exactly how to use Evernote. They don't know how to use OneNote to do this and so on. And in fact, all you need to do is just start writing more stuff down relative to the private lives, the personal lives of people around you, and you will remember better. And that is enough. The question is not, is it as good as some totally searchable system that you can use a voice screen to do? The question is it better than nothing at all? And the answer to that is enormously so. Okay? And then we got to follow up, right?
Yeah, so the whole point of having all of this information is that you use it. So one of the things that I'm really bad at remembering what people are doing. And so they tell me that they were going to some event, I'd say, at the end of the day, they'd say, oh, I'm going to whatever tonight. And by the next morning, I was so focused on my task list that I'd forget all about it. So I literally used to open a calendar appointment and write in, ask about whatever, so that when they came in the morning, I could say, hey, how was that thing you went to last night? And it's absolutely okay to be bad at this, but it's not okay not to try. That's my theory. I'm okay with the fact that I'm bad at remembering, but I'm not okay with the fact that I don't try to remember.
Yeah, the whole idea of trying. And when people ask me about how do you remember people's names so well, when I present, I try to remember people's names. I said, well, one of the things I do is I let myself off the hook. Rather than comparing yourself to somebody who's exceptionally good at it, and there are people who are exceptionally good at it, and by the way, I'm not one of them, I simply say, if I forget your name, I'm going to ask you your name. I'm going to say, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten your name. And people forgive you immediately for that. Same thing here. It's okay to not follow up as often as you could. You don't have to become better overnight. And there are plenty of people who say, oh, I'm going to look great in a month. Well, it's harder than that. And to lose 25 pounds, you better give yourself a year or two and take it a step at a time. And it's not okay to not try and then whine that you don't get what you want. But it's not smart. It's not only not okay to not try, it's not smart to try to do it all in one fell swoop. I tell the story often of the executive who is told he's a jerk. And he said, you're right, I'm going to change my relationship with my admin. I'm going to change my relationship with my team. I'm going to apologize fully. I need to write the note of what I'm going to say. And I'm going to start patting people on the back more. No, Marshall Goldsmith actually told a story where he said, rather than going from being a total jerk to an angel in 2 weeks, let's just try not being a jerk, right? So you don't have to be great at this. You just have to make an effort on a regular basis to follow up. Yeah. And if you've written more stuff down, even if you haven't translated it somewhere, it's more likely you'll remember more, okay?
So things like people's weekly schedules. So, for instance, we don't book meetings after 3 on a Thursday because you have Drake, and we don't book meetings between 2:30 and 4:30 on any day because Maggie's children are coming off the bus and they need settling down when they come home from school.
Well, let me put it this way though, to make it clear to people, it's okay every once in a while to have a meeting then. But if you can avoid having a meeting then, particularly when you need me or Maggie, then by all means do so. There are plenty of meetings that happen without me or Maggie during those times. Yeah. And people know they try to work around my schedule. Although every once in a while we do have a meeting Thursday at 5. And I've asked Drake in advance, hey, can I step away for half an hour to be on the phone? He's like, sure, no problem. Because he knows I rarely do.
Exactly. And so everybody who is listening can do the same thing. So when somebody says, can we have a meeting at Thursday at 4, you can say, no, we can't. Can we do it at a different time because David picks up his kids because of his wife's MBA course? Let's do it earlier, or we'll do it Friday morning. And you'll look, it's the one-eyed, what is it? In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king rule.
Yes.
If you're the one who remembers odd things about people's schedules and is willing to stand up for trying to make accommodations for them, you'll look really good. They'll appreciate it, you'll feel good, and the work will get done better because it's at a time that's more convenient for everybody.
Exactly. Good. So I think that wraps it up, right?
Yeah.
We talked about what people need to know about, and that's easy. Just extrapolate from your own life, what's inside your own head. And you know it for your boss and for your peers and for your directs, obviously. And you could start building a mental dossier of those folks. And all you have to do is pay attention and ask a few questions and then follow up. I really feel like, I spent some time today. I'm actually in Shanghai recording this. And relationships are the core of Career Tools guidance. You can get ahead with results, but eventually, particularly at the top of your organization, you need relationships. You cannot create relationships overnight. And relationships are built by caring about what's important to other people. And really, it just takes a lot of listening. And that's it.
Yep, easy.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
That's it, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Hope you enjoyed Career Tools again this week. Tune back again next week. Until then, see you.